my antidote that I speak about in the book is I'm not going to demonize and dehumanize those that disagree with me, even if I feel like what they're doing is absolutely, it lacks decency. I'm not going to dehumanize them. We just have to find a better way.
Hello, friends. Welcome to the Let's Give a Damn podcast. I'm your host, Nick Lapara. Thank you so much for being here. I'm honored that you've chosen to spend some time with me this week. Truly grateful. Before I introduce my guest today, I want to give you a heads up that we are starting a brand new series on Instagram Live called LGAD Live. Every Friday at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time, I'll go live for an hour with someone I think you'll want to hear from. Some will be former podcast guests, and others will be new friends that I want to introduce to you. If you give a damn and don't follow us on Instagram right now, what are you even doing with your life? Please change that today because we're sharing some meaningful things on there, and I don't want you to miss this series. Our first guest last Friday was retired NFL linebacker, founder of Adaptive Training Foundation, and my good friend, David Vobora. You can watch our hour-long chat right now in our Instagram feed. And I hope you'll join us live. Every week, you'll be able to watch it after the fact, but it's better live. So at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time every Friday, grab a drink, join us so that you can interact, so you can ask questions, so on and so forth. It'll be a good time. Okay, our guest this week is the founder of One Day's Wages, the president-elect of Bread for the World, and the author of Thou Shalt Not Be a Jerk, Eugene Cho. Wait, that didn't come out right. I am not in any way telling Eugene in Old English to not be a jerk. That is, however, the name of his latest book, his new book that came out a few weeks ago. Y'all, no bullshit. I truly enjoyed every single second of this conversation. Eugene is delightful, and he has so much to teach us. I could talk to Eugene for hours. And little does he know, I'm probably going to pester him soon to ask for more time because I just want to get to know him more, and I know that I have so much to learn from him, so much wisdom to glean from. So, we have so much to learn from this lifelong damn giver. I can't wait for you to hear it, so let's jump right in, shall we? Here's my conversation with the one, the only Eugene Cho. Let's go. Eugene Cho, thank you so much for coming on the Let's Give a Damn podcast.
Hey, man, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, super excited you're here. So you're in Seattle, correct?
I am in Seattle, and I will not be going anywhere anytime soon, and I hate it.
Yes. Oh, dude, same here. I mean, I don't know where you are on the Enneagram or extroverted, introverted scale. Like, I am an off the charts extrovert. I am an Enneagram 8. I just want to be doing things and disrupting things and hanging with people. And it's been kind of an interesting sort of, like, obviously mild torture, but torture might be the right word to have me at home all the time, not traveling, not doing things. It sounds like you like to have your hands in a bunch of things too. So you're probably missing out on just being with people and traveling and stuff.
Yeah, and to be honest, I'm the opposite of you. I'm an introvert. I'm an extreme introvert. I like being alone, but I don't like being locked up at home, feeling anxious, having my wife say, "Where are you going? Where are you breathing? Why are you doing this?"
Yeah.
She's the opposite of I am. She's very cautious, which I really, really appreciate, just in case she's listening to this. I love you, honey.
That's right.
But yeah, I think it's just not having the freedom. And I love the outdoors. I love fishing. And so that's been something that I've had to really put on hold for the time being. But obviously, you and I and others understand that this is a serious situation, and we got to do our part to be safe.
How is Seattle doing right now? Like, are there phases going on to reopen? What is that looking like?
This is such an interesting conversation for me because, I have friends like you all over the country and all over the world.
Yep.
And sometimes I forget how big the United States is. It is such a big country. And therefore, each region, each city goes through, I think, different phases. And Seattle was known as the epicenter of COVID-19 when it first came to the United States. And so, man, it was really intense early on. And the rest of the country were on beaches doing their thing. So having said that now, I think a lot of cities are looking at Seattle as one that's kind of going before them as a city that has experienced it intensely. And so we are opening things up, national parks or local parks, recreational fishing, things of that nature. Farmers market, it opened up in the first phase about 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
And so we're now entering into phase two. And supposedly, sometime by early July, while still practicing social distancing, things will be opened up. I'm doing air
Yeah.
quotes right now, but
Yeah.
it's kind of the TBD. We want everyone to do their part, and I think the city has done well on the most part, even though while I don't know your particular perspective and politics on things, the image that I just cannot stomach is people with their machine guns and AKs. I don't know. I know you gave me permission to swear. There aren't enough right swear words
Yeah.
to articulate how I feel about that. So it's frustrating because,
Yeah, there's room for all sorts of opinions and input, right? Because the reality is, none of us know what the hell we're doing, and very few
mm,
of us know what the hell we're talking about, right? We might be throwing out ideas or theories and stuff, but very few people know what's going on. And so, again, I'm all for, let's have conversations. Are we opening too soon? Should we stay
it's good.
closed? All that. But when you take to the streets with the guy that entered Subway the other day with a bazooka. I mean, I think that's the real term for it. Like, strapped on his back. What in the hell are you doing out with a bazooka? Like, that's not about protesting peacefully or saying, "Hey, we need to get back to
Yeah.
work." No, that is, you are making a very clear and ridiculous statement with that. And to put up signs like, "I need a haircut." If it's I don't have any more money left and I'm gonna die if I don't go out. Totally. Let's have that conversation. People are running out of money. But if
Right.
your reason for going back, which was a ton of the signs that we saw, right, in
Right.
Lansing, Michigan, and other places, was, "I need a haircut. I don't care. Just buzz your head. Like, it doesn't
Ugh.
matter." You know what I'm saying? So it's
Yeah.
pretty hard to stomach those. I feel
Yeah.
you on that.
Well, I want to give some advice for people that need a haircut. There's this thing called YouTube, and you could actually learn how to kind of semi do a decent job getting a haircut.
I shaved my head for this. I shaved my head and my face. I started out with a lot of hair and a beard. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to shave it all off, and then I don't have to worry about it. And I'll grow it back out when we're back out in
That's
public.
right.
But
We're not going anywhere, man.
no, we're not going anywhere. So, real quick before we jump into things, I have a love for the Seattle area. We lived for 4 years in Tacoma before
Hmm.
moving to Nashville. And
Okay.
those were honestly our four favorite. My wife and I have been married for 12 years. We did the first 4 years in Minneapolis, and then we did 4 years in Tacoma, and then we've done almost 4 years in the Southeast now. And our favorite 4 years of our marriage and maybe of our lives,
Mm.
kind of, were in the Pacific Northwest. I
All
mean,
right.
it's we think every single day about why we left, and there are reasons about why we left and why we probably won't go back. But man, what a beautiful place to be and live. And you get the best of, literally, you get the best of all worlds up there in the PNW. It's fantastic.
Well, you're making me really sad because a year from now, my wife and I are going to make a cross country move from Seattle to DC. And so it has been a season of grieving. Obviously, we're not running away, we're running into vision and
Yes.
call and what have you. But I think you're absolutely right. This is one of the most beautiful places, not just in the country, but I think in the world, particularly in the summer. And so,
Yes.
um, but yeah,
Yeah, and we'll talk about this cross country move that you're going to make, because I'm sure it's tied to your new role at Bread for the World. But why don't we, before we get into some of the things, I want to talk about one day's wages. I want to talk about Bread for the World, your books, all
yeah.
that. Before we get to that, give us a little bit, for a few minutes, a little bit of context, your story. Where do you come from? What are the kinds of people, places, and things that shaped you into who you are today?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I was born in Seoul, South Korea, immigrated when I was 6 years old. Both my parents were born in what is now called North Korea. It's really fascinating when people ask them, where are you from? They just say Korea. And then when they ask from the North or South, they're just like, Korea. There was only one country at
Yeah.
that time. But it kind of shows you, even in one person's lifetime, there's been some significant dramatic shifts in their own context. But we immigrated when I was 6 years old, and my parents were so obsessed with wanting that American dream for their kids. They were unable to go to school, experienced a lot of poverty, extreme poverty. every now and then my parents share stories about needing to pull out grass when they could find grass and consuming it because they had such hunger pangs and
Wow.
needed to satisfy those hunger pangs. It was just 2 years ago at the age of 82 when my father shared with me that he had lived in a refugee camp for a short time when he was younger, separated
Wow.
from his family during the Korean War. And it was really fascinating when I asked him why it took him 82 years to basically share that with me, to share that story. And his answer still, it's very haunting, but also very, very prophetic. He just said, some things are very painful. You don't share.
Mm.
And so I think, all of us, we're a set of both beautiful things and traumatic things. And somehow by God's grace, we're able to live and do what we can. But I grew up in San Francisco. That's where my heart is still, I think, to be honest with you. Went to the public school systems there, flunked first grade because I was afraid to raise my hands because I didn't know a lick of
Mm.
English. Kids were brutal at times. And by the time I got to middle school, I was voted the shyest kid in middle school, developed a stuttering problem, just had a really hard time with people. That was probably my biggest fear is just people, being
Mm.
around people. So I think I'm an introvert for lots of reasons, but I think part of it is just kind of the way that I was struggling through immigration about belonging. Belonging was a huge thing. Like, who am I? Where do I belong? Am I American? Am I Korean? It's fascinating because even right now, sometimes when I raise questions about justice or about racism, particularly racism around COVID-19 and the rise of anti-Asian rhetoric and racism that's going on. Even to this day, at the age of almost 50 years old, I still get people saying, "Go back home." So I feel very secure with who I am and my identity. But for some, it's always amazing. The idea of belonging is still a contested issue. But I became a follower of Jesus at the age of 18, right before college. And so college was very formative. Went to UC Davis, double majored in psychology and theater. Backtrack a couple years, probably the thing that I'm most proud of as a human being was choosing to confront my biggest fear, which was public speaking. And
Mm.
so in high school, I auditioned for a theater play for Midsummer Night's Dream, was cast for the illustrious Wall, got 2 lines, but those 2 lines really, I mean, it sounds overly dramatic, but those 2 lines really changed my life, I think.
Wow.
It was just having the courage to name my fears, confront it, and didn't happen overnight, but it was just months and years about confronting some of those things. But double majored in psychology and theater in college. That was when I received kind of my call to become a pastor, a minister. And so graduated college a year early, drove cross country all the way to Princeton, New Jersey, to
Mm.
embark on a master's, excuse me, a master's of divinity degree at seminary, and went back to Korea as an adult, which was very formative too. I love that experience to go back with new lens, new perspective. Met my wife there to be, and fast forward, gosh, 25, 30 years, here I am, 49 and a half years old, chatting with you, trying to give a damn as well. So
I love it. No, that's really cool. So was your family religious, or is that something you found later on? Where
it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of both. My great grandfather, according to kind of our family story, our great grandfather was one of the first people in his village outside of a larger city called Pyongyang. Now, Pyongyang is the capital city today of North Korea. But supposedly, he was one of the first people to say yes to Jesus because of these crazy white Protestant missionaries that set sail across the world. And he was so gripped by the story of Jesus, came back home, shared this news with my great grandmother. She also came to faith, and our whole household came to faith. So, yes, spirituality, belief in Jesus it has a prominent role in our family lineage and story. But I think for myself, like a lot of folks who may grow up in a particular context or culture, I think there was a season when I really resisted it, maybe even despised it, especially when you were forced to go to church. And so my teenage years, I went through a lot of not just rebellion about spirituality and religion. I think just rebellion, period, about identity as well. So it was at the age of 18 when I think I made that personal kind of devotion, that personal decision, however you want to articulate it. I think in the classic evangelical terminology, 25 years ago, I would say stuff like, no, I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior in my heart. But it was at that season when I basically came to a point where I just said, I don't know everything about you, but I know enough that I want to follow you and
Hmm.
devote my life as a follower of Jesus Christ. And that's been my journey for the past, that was 18. I'm 49. So it's been a while now.
Been a while. You talked a lot about being introverted and kind of, yeah, not very shy. You got this award that you probably didn't want to get of being the shyest kid in middle school. How did you become a dam giver? How did you become such a justice oriented person? Like, how did that fit into your story? Where you went from, or maybe, I mean, not went from being shy. You said you're still introverted and stuff, but like
Yeah.
went from being, someone that probably didn't do too much outward talking and like seeking and looking for things to being somebody that did see problems and tackle them, which we'll get to talk about them. Like you've tackled
Yeah.
so many big problems in your life, in your career so far.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. I always find it ironic that I was voted the shyest kid in middle school, and yet they still knew me. I had no idea that people knew who I was, but there I was, voted the shyest kid in sixth grade. But I think there's a couple reasons why it's always mattered to me, as far as I can remember. And I think part of it is connected to my immigration story. As an immigrant, from the day one, I was just seen as an other. Now, I'm not trying to like vilify these first graders or second graders because sometimes we just don't know better.
Yep.
But I think it's very easy or tempting for us to see people that aren't like us. And sometimes, in our mean spiritedness, we can somehow then begin to bully others. So it's, I think, a fair statement to say I was otherized and bullied. I was pointed out as someone that didn't look like them. It didn't help that because I was so shy in elementary school that there were occasions where I would pee in my pants because
Mm.
the scariest thing for me to do was to raise my hand and speak in public. And so, but I think it was just those kinds of experiences of being otherized, seen not as one of them. And so as a result, I feel like I have lived the bulk of my life on the margins. And I say that not to sound like a victim or to kind of perpetuate
Oh, sure.
victimization, but that's the lens by which I've always seen the world as far as I can remember. And then in middle school, I lived in a predominantly African American neighborhood. I'm grateful for the fact that I lived in a very diverse community and society, but I also then experienced kind of the bullying from another perspective, from another community of people, from African Americans. And then I kind of went through lots of different things when I began to explore the idea of Jesus, study Jesus. The thing about Jesus that most fascinated me was the fact that he just was inclined towards the edges and margins.
Hmm.
He had a proclivity, an inclination towards those who were forgotten and had experiences of injustice and what have you. And that's always fascinated me about Jesus. So when I became a Christian, because that was the part that really moved me, I was expecting that to be this a huge crescendo of momentum, learning more about these things. And ironically, I think after I became a Christian, I was surprised that it wasn't the case.
Mm.
And I think I've always struggled with that. Even now, as an institutional pastor, ordained as a minister of the word and sacrament, I have my titles, my platforms, speak at conferences, is trying to make sure that I myself am not forgetting the fact that my first encounter with Jesus was on the margins. Because sometimes I think in the church, we can try to move him at the center of things. And it's about power and privilege and all of those things as well. And I'm not suggesting that he's not everywhere, but a Jesus that's only in the center and not on the margins seems like a very, very scary proposition to me. But that's, when people ask me why, it's always the way that I've seen not just Jesus, but the way that I've read the scriptures.
Yeah, I'm glad, among other things, you pointed to being an immigrant kid, right? My dad came here when he was a kid from war-torn
Mm,
Guatemala. And we actually went back when I was a young kid. We went back and lived there for 10 years. And that kind of put me on a trajectory of, then after high school, spending 6 years traveling the world, 30 something countries and spending a lot of
mm,
time overseas,
wow.
mostly with kind of poor places, third world places with people, so many people on the margins, right?
Mm,
All over India, all over Africa, in different places, and that I for me, I point so much of my shaping, my formation that I have seen happen in my life back to uh, what my dad and his family did coming here, and then my dad taking us back there for 10 years, and the things that I saw and experienced there, I'll never forget them. I mean,
Mm,
it shaped every part of who I am today, and
absolutely.
I can see how that, that plus your, the you talked a lot about Jesus as well. Like, he is clearly someone who went after people that everybody else was ignoring. That is
Hmm.
without a doubt. You don't have to even have a religious lens to see that. You read the Bible, you're like, oh, this dude cared about people that everybody ignored, people on the margins, people on the outskirts. So that's really cool. Um, let's talk about one day's wages. We're going to talk about a few of the things that you've done and are doing
Yep.
for the next section of our conversation. I think I'm not going to give it away for those that don't know about one day's wages. I mean, you might be able to tell from the title, but I think it's a fantastic it's a fantastic vision, a fantastic way to get people's attention. Tell us about the organization, how it came about. Where did that idea come from?
Yeah. So thanks for asking. One Day's Wages is a nonprofit humanitarian organization that my wife and I and our three kids started about a little over 10 years ago. And, because I've always given a damn, I've always cared. But I think the big tension for me is sometimes the connection between knowledge, conviction, and then the embodiment of these things. Whatever you want to call it, we can call it hashtag activism, we can call it slacktivism. I'm not here to shame anyone, but I do know that it's a real tension in my life, even now and back then as well. So, you go back about 15 years ago, I have been developing a reputation, particularly among Christian and Christian leaders, as a pastor who has a deep theology about justice, which is not a bad thing at all. But
Sure.
after a while, I began to really wrestle with the perception that people had of me, writing, blogging, all of these things, and then just feeling like there was a lack of resonance and connection. There was this dissonance, if you will. So I'm on this trip with a couple other pastors to do research because I love research. I love data. I love sciences. I think it helps us to make better decisions and all of that kind of stuff. And I knew so much about issues of global poverty. And again, global poverty meant a lot to me to begin with because that's my family story. That's my parents' story. And I wanted to make sure that I could give back in ways that I uh, am able to give back. So I'm in Myanmar, otherwise known as Burma,
Burma.
visiting
Yep.
some makeshift classrooms there. The genocide that was going on in Burma, particularly during that time, was just so intense, but not many people knew what was going on. UN officials had said that the genocide going on in Burma at that time in the 80s, early 90s, was probably as intense, as diabolical as the situation in Darfur, but just not on the same scale of actual number of people being impacted. So we're in this village, a makeshift village, doesn't even have a name. I think they were called Village Number 81 because they were
Wow.
constantly moving from place to place to place because the military government, they were after them. It was a small ethnic minority group called the Karen people. And I had a chance to visit a makeshift classroom. Imagine 15 tables, 15 chairs, none of them matching, this green, overused, overscarred chalkboard on its wall. And there was a classroom for first to fifth graders. And I'll never forget this. I walk in, and there was the most hideous, the most graphic, the most violent collage of photos plastered, taped on the chalkboard. And I'm not a teacher per se, but in my mind, all of these thoughts are going through my head like, what the hell is going on
Yeah.
here? Like, that is not appropriate for a classroom of first to fifth graders. And it was a collage of photos of men, women, and children with missing body limbs and blood oozing out of their bodies.
Mm.
And again, I'm still not sure what's going on. I'm trying to be appropriate. Do I ask about this photo? And the guy who was hosting me, sensing that I was probably very disturbed, actually invites me to draw closer to the collage of photos. And he gets on his knees and he points to these bottom row. And it's the bottom row is consisting of greenish, grayish, metallic contraptions. And in his best attempt to speak English, he says, Pastor Cho, these are landmines. We must teach children avoid landmines,
Mm.
which explained why they felt the necessity to put these graphic photos to remind kids about the urgency of being cautious and careful. Yeah, every time I share that story, I still just get goosebumps because it was
Yeah.
just very haunting. And I had a chance to meet some of the survivors of some of these landmines. And later that day, when I asked one of the leaders of the village what was challenging, knowing that I had visited a classroom, he had said, paying teachers' salaries hard. And so I just asked, well, how much are their salaries? Seems to be the most logical question to ask. And he sticks out his four fingers and says $40 US. And in my naivete, I said $40 per day. And he laughed. And I realized that's obviously a stupid comment to make. And so I said, I'm sorry, did you mean $40 a week? He laughs again, shakes his head. And at this point, I'm like, okay, wow, this is more stunning than I thought. The next logical question was, do you mean their salaries are $40 a month? And at this point, I'm just stunned that I'm even asking this question, $40. He, I think, is at this point really irritated and shakes his head again
Not a year.
and says, $40 one year.
Hmm.
And again, I say that not to try to impose guilt on any of your listeners. I think part of giving a damn is being truth tellers,
Yep.
right? We've got to tell the truth, even if it sucks, even if it discourages us, even if it does make us feel guilty, even though that might not be our intentionality. And I was just stunned by it. $40 per year. I mean, how much do we pay for our internet? Uh, and so I came back home, processed that with my wife, shared a little bit with my kids. My wife and I, we just said, let's pray about it and see what we can do. In my mind, I thought I'll write a great blog post. I was a prolific blogger back then. Maybe I'll give a nice sermon, maybe write a Facebook post. But I mean, this is crazy. We both decided to pray. And we felt God convict both of us separately to give up 1 year's wages of our salaries. And I say that not to sound boastful, right? Because I know I've received my share of criticism. And it's not meant to sound boastful. It's not what we thought. It was a lot more difficult than we imagined because we don't have, at that time, my salary as a pastor was $68,000 lying under our mattress. So it took us on a journey of 3 years of saving, simplifying, and selling off things that we didn't need. And I'll just point this out, that I think oftentimes when we give a damn about injustice, poverty, brokenness in the world, obviously there are things that we need to change. I think what surprised me was in this process of those 3 years, it really changed me and it really changed us. Like, it really began to expose
Hmm.
some of the things that I didn't realize that I held on to, And so it kind of led me to eventually write a book called Overrated: Are We More in Love with the Idea of Changing the World Than Actually Changing the World? And that book is really a confession. And I still struggle with it, if I'm honest with you. It's a privilege for me to come on these podcasts and other podcasts and interviews and so forth. But it's a regular grind for me to connect my convictions to say, when I say I give a damn, I'm not just talking about it into a nice microphone on a
Sure.
podcast, but I'm just trying to live it out. And there are good days and then there's not so good days. But anyways, going back to the story, in that 3-year process, we were just inspired by this idea of starting something called One Day's Wages, where we wanted to inspire people around the world to consider just giving 1 day of their wages, whether it be once a year, once a quarter, once a month, once a week. And lo and behold, we didn't want to ask people to do something that we weren't willing to do ourselves. So as best as we could, we shared our story about a middle-class family in Seattle trying to do our part. And it just kind of spread, and
Hmm.
thus far we've had about 14,000 people around the world partner with us, some giving 1 day's wages, some giving $10, some giving $20. The most inspiring donation we've ever received was an $86 donation from a 16-year-old high school student who sent in that $86 with the note, "This is my 8-hour shift from Subway.
Mm,
It really captures kind of the heart of what we're trying to do.
yeah.
That you don't have to be a billionaire or a rock star or a celebrity, but every single one of us, if we all give a damn, I mean, I think that's really it. If we all do give a damn, we're going to be okay.
Here's what I love about this organization you started, and even the book title that you talked about, this book that you wrote, is precisely that. I think most people that are not actively doing something or giving a damn, it's because they're overwhelmed. They're focused on too much.
Mm,
They're focusing on all the things that are happening in the world, all the problems, all the things we could be working on that we could be fixing, and it gets so overwhelming, and
mm,
so they just plop on the couch exhausted from just thinking through it, and they just binge watch Netflix for another night. And versus just focusing and narrowing down and figuring out what is my world.
yeah,
Instead of trying to change the world, what is my world? What
yeah,
what what can I do that, because the reality is, if all of us, if all 7 point whatever billion people on the earth, everyone has something to offer, even in the world. I mean, I've met kids in the slums of India, that are in Hyderabad, India, that are just, they don't have anything. They have less than zero things,
mm,
and they have something to give. They have kindness. They have so many talented things they could be doing, right? So no matter who you are, and if all of
mm,
us did our small part, and for some it'll be bigger, for you and for me and for other people, we've got a
yep,
bigger plate. We're doing more
yep,
things. We're starting things. But for so many people that it feels so overwhelming, stop thinking about all that. Do the hard work to figure out who you are and what you can do, and then do
right,
it. Like
right.
that, I mean, what
It's
you just
good.
shared, the kid at Subway, $86. Like, that is so, he could make all the excuses. He could have done that. I can't give this money. There's so much going on. What am I going to do for those people in Myanmar, in
Mm,
Burma? Like, and he starts talking, getting in his head, and all of a sudden he's like, I'm out. I can't do it.
mm,
He just said, no, I can do one day. I can do one
mm,
day. Here's my
mm,
shift. Sent the money. You got it. And now, years later, you're still telling that story, encouraging
mm.
people. So I love that. Are we more? Of course, we're more in love with the idea of changing the world. It sounds so great. Every day, we're quoting John Paul II. We're quoting Maya Angelou. We're quoting Martin Luther King Jr. We're so
Mm,
excited about the idea
yep,
of being a world changer. And then it's like,
exactly.
what the hell are you doing about it? And it's like, well, I got student loans, and I got kids, and totally, those are all hard things. So instead of trying to be the next Maya Angelou, or the next, Martin Luther King Jr., or the next Mother Teresa, be you. Small
Yep,
thing. What is the one, two, or three things you can do in your community, in rural, outside of Chicago and Illinois, like in a
yeah,
suburb, or in Nebraska, or in LA or San Francisco or wherever. Like, I just think we need to, like, just everybody chill the hell out.
yeah.
What can you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're naming some real struggles, real tension that all of us wrestle with. I mean, there are folks that do want to do stuff, and I think what we wrestle with most is we're overly ambitious, and
Yeah,
as a result, that over ambition is paralyzing us. And so, I don't want to knock people's dreams. I don't want to somehow cut people down. That's not my intent. But when we're trying to go from A to Z
yep,
in 1 week, and in some ways, in our kind of social media culture where we're talking about what it means to go viral, all of these things, while there is a conversation to be had around it, if we're not careful, it actually undermines what we're trying to do.
100%.
I think Mother Teresa's wisdom here is really apropos when she says, if you want to change the world, just start with the person near you.
Yeah,
And I think there's something to that. And if we all do our part, and as we grow in that journey, I think there are going to be opportunities and moments when the small things that we started has the ability to grow in capacity. And so we would never have imagined, to be honest with you, that one day's wages would grow. Now, I only have 2 full-time staff, 2 part-time staff, volunteer my time at one day's wages. But last year, we were able to grant out about $1.3 million.
amazing.
Again, just because of just everyday people. We have some folks that are able to give larger sums of money, some folks that are giving $5, $10. We have little kids that are giving their piggy banks to us. It's all beautiful. I think it's all because we're trying to do our part in caring and giving a damn. So I love what you just shared about sometimes we can just be think way up here in the clouds and end up not doing anything, uh, and binge watch Netflix, which
Yeah.
is what I did last night. I'm sorry.
No, and there
Just kidding.
the thing is that might be the what's on the menu for the night, right? Is like just chill and you got to take time, dude. I crash. I go so hard, and my wife's like, dude, slow down. And then I'll crash, right? And then I have, occasionally I have my nights. I'm not. This is not like an anti watching
Sure.
Netflix thing, but it is a pro. I think some things that I can pick out of your story is when you decided, right, 10 years ago or whatever it was, we're going to give a year of our wages, right? What did you say next? 3 years of preparation for that. People also, I think another reason why we're more in love with the idea of changing the world than actually doing it is because we want things, and you mentioned virality too, right? The social media viralness or just things we would much rather, we kind of get like starstruck with, Tony Robbins giving away 100 million meals this year or whatever the case may be, things that Charity Water and all these organizations are doing. And it's like, those things didn't happen overnight.
That's right.
They took years. And the very fact that you were able to do that a decade ago with your wife and kids and form One Day's Wages was because of a whole lifetime of experiences. So we've got to get really good as humans to say, you know what, I want to be a damn giver 50 years from now. Not just not trying to get some like viral thing going, but I want to be doing this for the long haul. So I need to put in the work today. What can I do today that's super small? That's helping somebody today. Could be $1, could be a good deed, could be anything. But like start now and then build those up so that you can become giving a damn does not happen overnight. And if it does happen overnight, you're probably not doing it well because you've got to crash and burn a few times. You've got to piss off a few people. You've got to do it really wrong. You've got to check your motives. You've got to work on humility and integrity and all those things. So if you've been doing it overnight and you're like, oh, look at me. No, that's not how it works. Like I've been doing it since I started giving a damn on my own when I was 12 years old, living in Guatemala, didn't know the language yet, just started doing stuff with this lady named Susie Wolpert. And she's still doing it 20 something years later, which is amazing. Yeah. But like, that's when I started, and it's taken me from 12 to 36 now, 24 years to get to this place where I can say some of these things. And I'm still a young pup when it comes to giving a damn. Like I still have so much to learn, right? So I think it's this not being in it for the marathon, but maybe more for like the 100-yard dash, right? Like we did in school. Like that's not, what does that do?
Well, you said a word in your last sentence that really is important to me and which I didn't really talk about or know about when I was younger. And it's just a marathon, a perspective, a theology, a praxis of marathon. And we all understand that there are seasons we've got to sprint, but it's just not sustainable. If we look at justice work or giving a damn as a sprint, we don't need people that are going to burn out after 100 yards. We want people to be in it for the long haul. And so I think having these conversations about not just giving a damn, but doing it in a way that reflects integrity, it reflects humility, that it reflects collaboration, and having a whole trajectory of knowing these things. Because I can tell you that while I cared about things when I was in my teens or in my college years, I'm really grateful for all the lessons that I've learned, good and bad, that's made me who I am now. Because it's made me not just someone who gives a damn, but I want to be a wiser person.
Yeah. Yep.
That gives a damn. And I think we need wisdom in this work, especially right now.
Yeah, no, that's super great. I want to spend the last section of our conversation on your new book. But before that, let's talk about, you mentioned earlier, you're leaving your beloved Pacific Northwest and you're moving east. You're moving east, I presume, for this new role as the president of Bread for the World. Talk about how that came about briefly and why you're taking that role and why it's important enough to you to move to take this role that is going to require you to move to this city on the East Coast, far away from the land that you love. Oh, DC is still a great city, but it's not. It's no Seattle or San Francisco.
No, but I am going from one Washington to the other Washington
Yes, you are.
with the letters DC behind it. It's not anything that I imagined or planned or even desired, to be honest with you. I stepped down from a church that my wife and I planted about 2 years ago. And after 18, 19 years, we stepped down. It's an amazing, healthy, flourishing church. I think to be honest, I kind of went through a midlife reflection, midlife crisis as I was turning 50. I was having some morbid thoughts like, you know what, I may have about 15 robust years left. How do I want to
Mm,
invest those 15 years? Now, again, who knows how many years I have left, but in terms of like robust, still high energy years, and I just wanted to really make the most impact with the years that I have left. And while I'll continue to do one day's wages, the call or the invitation at Bread for the World was really, really unique because they are a Christian advocacy organization that urges lawmakers to help shape policies and laws and budgets that more reflect compassion, empathy, justice, kingdom
mm,
mindedness, that more reflect this idea that, as human beings, part of what it means to be a human being is that we should all care and give a damn. And we're not impacting just hundreds of people or thousands of people, but we're impacting millions and millions of people, not just in
mm.
our own cities and country, but around the world. Just to give an example, this has been a brutal week. I'll officially become president and CEO on July 1, but I'm working behind the scenes, onboarding, kind of engaging our team on policies and engaging Congress right now. And because we're living in this COVID-19 season, as you know, man, it has been so gut wrenching to see those really just raw, vulnerable images of miles of cars waiting for food banks and food
Yeah.
lines, right? Just for one or two bags of food. And then we haven't really been exposed to what's going on globally, right? There are nations, Central Republic Africa, for example, they have 3 ventilators for their entire country. For their
My
entire
God.
country, there's
Mm,
probably a handful of nations right now that have under 10 ventilators for their entire nation, which is the reason why some nations are going in like these absolute control lockdown because they're so
yeah.
petrified what could happen. But yeah, it's been a really intense period because we're working behind the scenes with other coalition members to urge our lawmakers to say, hey, we get it that you're bailing out companies and small businesses and the airline industry. We get that. We're not against those things. But man, we've got to be thinking about those whose margins are very, very small just to begin with, right? So our family, we've been affected by COVID-19, big loss of income, but we've never had to worry about our next meal or the next week's meal or the next month's meal. We haven't had to worry about rent and what have you. But there are so many people. Just yesterday, we read reports that 40% of American families with under $49,000 in income are unemployed and have lost their jobs. 40%. I mean, that stunned me
Yeah.
when I read that. And then we're told that by the World Food Program and the United Nations that those who are going to experience starvation in the world in the next year might double in the next year. And so this is part of the reason why I joined Bread for the World. And I'm really excited and humbled and burdened to lead the organization is because we want people to urge our lawmakers. We know that it can't just be you. It can't just be me. It just can't be a church. It can't just be a company. It also involves our government to do their part as well, especially in our nation. It happens to be and constantly advertises itself to be the greatest nation on the earth. And so we want to make sure that it's great in the way that it cares for those who are vulnerable and marginalized, particularly around issues of hunger and poverty.
That's really beautiful. I'm so glad that you're going to be in DC. I mean, DC is such an influential city, not just for our country but for the world. And I think you'll be a great addition to others there, like John Cotton Richmond, who took a friend of mine who you probably know who he is, and he was on the podcast a couple years ago. But, him taking a role in the White House as the ambassador for against human trafficking, and like I have very little hope in our political system, in our politicians. I don't trust any of them, or I shouldn't say any of them, but it's very hard to trust them because
Hmm.
I mean, you see the
Yep, we get
stories and
that.
you see the leaks and you hear like all the stuff. So it's really great to know that there are more people like yourself that are heading there in the hopes of kind of building up that integrity and building up like caring for, you talked about America and how great we like to say that she is, even though we're far down on the list on a lot of the things that matter, right? And so I think you have the right perspective was, yeah, let's be great, but let's be great in the things that actually matter. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter. It does not matter if we are the wealthiest country in the world, or in the top 5. It doesn't
Mm,
matter if we have some of the metrics that we look at. It's if we're not feeding people,
mhm.
if people don't have health care that they can rely on, if they're not being fed, if there's not a living wage that they can live and
That's right.
thrive by, none of the other metrics that we're using actually matter. So super excited that you all are going to be there.
Well, Nick, let me just give one little story and
Yeah.
perspective about why this week has been so hard and challenging for our staff. Just yesterday, the Democrats proposed for the next stimulus bill $3 trillion. And the next few weeks, they're going to see both parties go at it and argue and all that kind of stuff and produce something. A $3 trillion bill called the HEROES Act, HEROES, is the Hero Stimulus Act. And our coalition, we were really pleased that they accepted the 15% increase in SNAP benefits, which basically is the modern version of food stamps for those who are experiencing hunger in our country. So we were really pleased with that. But we were stunned that a coalition of advocacy organizations proposed $12 billion to be added to international aid because of what's going on. And we were just stunned that in a $3 trillion bill, they took out the proposal for
Mm,
$12 billion for international aid, which is going to have a dramatic impact. So the fight isn't over, and so this is why I would urge people who might not know a bread, check us out, join us, bread.org, because we want people to raise their voices. Like, do what you're doing. Like, do what you're doing. Give a damn in your context, in your communities, in your churches, but also join others around the nation, urging our lawmakers to do their part from a government perspective to say, as you articulated, let's be great, but let's be great in the things that really do matter. I'm a proud, naturalized American citizen, but sometimes it concerns me at the decrease, at the sickness of the lack of empathy that I feel
yeah.
like is just brewing within our systems and even in our respective hearts.
Yeah. We don't have to get into that, but I totally, with one thing I've been thinking about a lot, I'm about to have a conversation tomorrow with my friend David on Instagram Live. He's a former NFL player, great guy, gives a damn in so many ways. And one of the things we're going to talk about is this idea of freedom and liberty, right? It's something that we tout and we talk about it all the time. And, we see these protests. And again, let's just take the politics out of it. All these protests that are happening, like, you can't tell me what to do. You can't do all these things, like, blah, 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 blah. And there's so much anger and, spitting in each other's faces and guns and stuff. And it's like, and I had a conversation with a friend of mine yesterday who is a libertarian, and I respect some things about that party. And let's have a conversation, right? But one thing I can't deal with, and one thing I want to talk more about with more people on all sides of all areas of the spectrum, is liberty, freedom is not me being able to do whatever the hell I want. That is not freedom. There's so much bondage in that. Let's look at the course of history. Those that were able to do whatever they wanted, a lot of things that went wrong. It's not that. It's doing freedom to do whatever we ought to do,
Mm-mm.
right? And
Mm,
that's going to include what's good for you, Eugene, what's good for me, what's
mm,
good for my neighbor, because
mm,
we all win. When my neighbor wins, I win. When the person I don't even know wins in the next state over, I
I
win.
like that.
If
It's
we're
good.
truly, and so I think there's a big conversation that needs to happen, which let's just jump into the last part of our conversation right now. Let's talk about your book, right? Because you just wrote a book, it was out March 1, I think, called Thou Shalt Not Be a Jerk, A Christian's Guide to Engaging Politics. This is a very timely book, I think, for not just for, I think, do you think people that aren't Christians could even read this and glean from it? I think so.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I've been so encouraged by the number of quote unquote non-Christians, non-religious people that have written to me to say how much they appreciated the book. That there were some parts that they didn't fully understand because of their different
Sure.
lens, but there was a good chunk of it that really spoke to the toxicity that exists in our, not just in our politics, but our culture as a whole. So, absolutely, I think it's a book that anyone can read and hopefully glean from.
When did you decide to? I think some very interesting things happened 2015, 2016 that I think heightened the ferociousness of discussions and debates, right? And now there's so much more than any other time in my short lifetime, so much animosity and so much hatred and so much, if we don't agree on everything, we can't agree at all. And
Yeah.
screw you, you're over there and I'm over here. So when did you start to write this book? Did it start in the 15, 16, or what was going on that prompted you to write a book called Thou Shalt Not
Yeah.
Be a
So
Jerk?
that's so interestingly, I gave a talk about this very topic and I entitled it 10 Commandments for How Christians Ought to Engage Politics. And I gave this about 11, 12 years ago. So think about several cycles of
Sure.
elections when President Obama was running against, I think, Mitt Romney, and it
Yep.
was just intense. I mean, it has been intense for a long time. And I think you're right. The last 5, 6 years, it's on a different level.
Yeah.
Um, and I was just so perturbed by the rhetoric that was spewing in our larger culture and society. But then you're right. About 3 or 4 years ago, I just got to a point where I just realized, man, this is the idolatry. This is the disease that is going to come back and hurt our society, our churches, our citizens, all of the above. And so when I began to write it, I started it about 3 years ago, started writing it, and I quit writing it 4 times. Like literally, I said some choice words that I can't say just in case my wife is listening to me and she scares me sometimes. I mean, I can't write this because
Yeah.
I was afraid of the very culture you were talking about. Like, if you're for me, we're great. If you're not in agreement with me, you're my enemy, and I'm here to destroy you. That kind of mentality. And so I quit writing it 4 times, but each time I just felt that much more. The word isn't convicted. I just felt really burdened. This is a book written out of burden. Like I'm really concerned about our society. I'm concerned about the church. I'm concerned about our politics, and managed to write it. And it's been hard, to be honest with you. There's been a lot of affirmations as I expected, and then there's been a lot of folks that have also written back. I just did an interview with Washington Post about a month ago when I responded to a tweet by President Trump. I try to be as respectful as I could be, but I took exception to his usage of calling COVID-19. It's been universally called COVID-19 coronavirus, with the exception of the first maybe month when it was called the Wuhan virus.
Sure.
But he went through a season or kind of a little period where he called it Chinese virus, and I took exception to that because there's been thousands upon thousands of documented cases of verbal, physical abuse, harassment that Asians and Asian Americans here and around the world have experienced, including my own family. So I wrote a response, and that tweet just went, I mean, it went crazy. And with the Washington Post picked it up, it went crazy. I got probably about 5,000 emails, comments saying, go
Wow.
back home. I'm going to buy your book just to burn it. So I responded, at least buy it
Yeah.
first,
Yeah.
you know. Yeah, I know to be honest, it was kind of discouraging, because there were such brutal, some blatantly racist comments. But in the big picture, like that's why I wrote the book. I wrote the book because we have a sickness, we have a disease, whatever you want to call it, and we have to confront it. My antidote that I speak about in the book is I'm not going to demonize and dehumanize those that disagree with me, even if I feel like what they're doing is absolutely, it lacks decency. I'm not going to dehumanize them. We just have to find a better way. And by suggesting a better way in our politics, I'm not suggesting that that's permission for us to be soft in the views or convictions that we have. Sometimes people misconstrue a third way or a middle path as us saying these are code words for no, we're not giving a damn. No, I'm saying let's give a damn, but let's be human in this process. We can't lose our souls in the process because it's not going to change overnight or at the next election at the end of this year. It's going to take years for us as a nation, as a society, to kind of recapture what it means to have a level of respect, empathy, decency, civility, even as and I love how you began the podcast. Like, we should absolutely have the freedom to argue and duke it out.
Yep.
We have to do that. The opposite of it is just like bullying people to the point that everyone's afraid to even have conversations. So then it's the extremists, it's the small minority extremists that are dominating the airwaves. And I just think there's a lot of folks in the middle, not necessarily politically middle, but just somewhere in the middle that
Yep.
know that this isn't working and we've got to find a better way.
Yeah, I mean, I am. It's no secret to anybody that knows me that I am, politically and societally left on most issues. But I have a huge problem. I have a tremendously huge problem with the far left in the same ways that I have a problem with the far right. It's the people that call for, just massive amounts of inclusivity and acceptance, and everything goes, except for if you don't agree with my conclusion on X, Y, or Z issue, and then it's like, fuck you, like you're out, right?
Yep.
That's
Yep.
how is that even? And I'm saying this like if I had a mirror in front of me, because I've had moments like that. They're not. It's definitely the exception to the rule for me. But I've had
Yep.
moments where I've acted that way, where it's like, well, if you don't, then get out. And it's
Yep.
like that is not a way to live. Like we've been doing it for the entirety of history. Like those that have the most success in actually coming up with, pointing out problems and then coming up with solutions are those that bring all the views to the table, and like we can talk those out, and it's going to get a little heated, and I'm okay with that. Let's get a little heated because these are big issues. These are important issues when we're talking about LGBTQ stuff, when we're talking about people's welfare and their minimum wage and healthcare. Like those are not issues to be trifled with. But the last thing I ever want is to be speaking into an echo chamber. I don't want to be preaching to the choir. And that's so much of what we're doing now. We can curate our social media profiles, right? And like kick everybody else out. We're blocking endlessly. And so now when I post something about X, Y, or Z issue, all I get is praise. All I get is people saying, oh, that's spot on. That is so great. You're so right. And that just affirms me versus letting my, having tons of conservatives, follow me, and libertarians and this and that and far left and far right. Because I need to be kept in check too. So I think, but there's a way to do that while still like, not being, there's a way to do all of that without being a jerk. And it can be hard, and it can be hard to listen to and hard to say the things. But we can do it all without, you said it, dehumanizing each other. Like we are all humans. We've all got perspectives. We've all got different stories, places we've come from, hurts, things we've experienced. I can't talk to you about any number of issues the same way I talk to my white Caucasian friend who, lived in Omaha, Nebraska growing up and has never been side-eyed by one person in their lives walking through a store, or when a virus comes to America that may have originated in Wuhan, like now it's your fault. You tweeted that one, the guy said, you ought to burn this book. You're a jerk. China virus came from China. Why are you not going after the China? It wasn't even, great formatting or, sentence structure, but, anyway, we could go on and on, but you get it.
No, I think it's really important. And I do hope, I really believe in this book. I just want, obviously this book came out a couple months ago, so all the plans for the book tour is no longer around, but I still really believe in the book, especially during this election season. I share 10 practical chapters for people to check out. One of the stories that I share in this book that I think is really important is a movement called MAGA, a play on MAGA, Make America Dinner Again. And there were these two Asian American women that were so crushed after the last presidential election, right? And that's typically what happens now in our political season. Half the nation gets really crushed. Half the nation feels like God answered our prayers. We're great, and it just switches back and forth. They were so distraught by the election that as they assessed their own lives, they wanted to speak to their friends who would have voted for President Trump. And they realized that they didn't know a single person that voted for President Trump. And it speaks to kind of either our intentional or unintentional ways that we create echo chambers where we surround ourselves with people that look like us, think like us, feel like us, and then praise us. And to their credit, they did something about it. They really wanted to better understand other people's perspectives because they realized they had no clue. So they put something out on social media, invited people for dinner. You bring a plate, everyone brings a dish. We're not going to argue or fight, but let's have a conversation. Let's talk about issues that really matter to us. And that gave birth to this thing called Make America Dinner Again. That, I'm not suggesting that this fuzzy notion that a meal is going to change the world or even change reviews, but I'm convinced that when we choose to break bread with people, like have substantive conversations, it's going to actually make you a better human.
Yep.
And you've got to be a better human to be able to learn to be a good neighbor to others, right? Because I think right now to be a good neighbor is let's just bully people into submission. And so I joined my local Seattle Make America Dinner Again, had a lot of really intense, contentious issues: immigration, human sexuality, politics, war, cannabis. I mean, all of the above. And we didn't solve anything. We didn't solve the national debt, but I think it really did make me a better listener, because I'm so set on wanting to correct people. So I talk about that in the book as well, along with other things.
No, I mean, Make America Dinner Again is great. I'm going to find it and link to it in the show notes of this conversation. Also, there's something similar happening all over the country with the People's Supper. Mickey Scope Jones, and her team have started the People's Supper. I totally agree with you. The best conversations I've had are over a meal, over a few beers, cigars. Like there's something about having that common thing that you guys are enjoying. And I think mostly like, of all the things I just mentioned, the thing we need the most is food, right? We can do without the beers and the cigars, but there is something about doing that common thing together that brings everybody to a level playing field. Now we're all being nourished in the same way by the same thing. The guard comes down. I've done very similar suppers where people from all over the spectrum come together. I mean, I've had very conservative, Trump-ish supporters sitting across from my friend Binyad, who's an Iraqi Muslim refugee that actually got stopped coming into America on Muslim Ban Day. They were coming in January 27, 2017, and they got sent back because it was the day that he said no more Muslims coming in, right? So, and they're sitting across having a fantastic conversation about these really intense, issues. And so it really is beautiful. I'm excited to share this book with people. Let's end with me pointing out a quote that you shared a couple days ago. You shared a Nouwen quote. Nouwen is one of my favorite humans. Dutch Catholic priest. Just so much gold from that man and his life and legacy. But you shared a quote, which is these questions. Did I offer peace today? Did I bring a smile to someone's face? Did I say words of healing? Did I let go of my anger and resentment? Did I forgive? And did I love? These are the real questions. I mean, I can't think of a better way to finish this conversation than with those wonderful questions. I mean, you can't, if you're having a shitty day and you've been too much on Twitter reading, this tweet and that tweet, or if you sit down and ask these questions of yourself, like things have to change. Like you can't go on, you can't move on from asking yourself, did I forgive? Did I love? Did I let go of resentment and anger? And then just go about still being pissed off about everything. Like things change when you ask those questions. So I think there's some real...
Yeah, man. Let me close with this.
Yeah, please do.
I think sometimes when you give a damn, it's really possible and even seductive for us to point the finger at others. To think about structural, institutional injustice, and those are real and there are conversations to be had. But I think when we're having this conversation about caring and giving a damn, it's the greatest temptation for me, at least, is to look to others and never to look within as well.
Yep.
And these questions, if somebody were to ask me right off the top of the bat, like, hey, what's your recommendation about give a damn? That Nouwen quote might be a great place to start and end.
Yeah.
And so it's actually something that I try to do in my morning and in the evening. Very simple, very profound. And it's haunting. And there are days, probably like you, where I go, man, this was a sucky day.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for an opportunity, hopefully, to wake up the next morning to start again. So thanks so much for having me on the show, man.
Eugene, thank you so much for joining us. This was awesome. So many blessings on what you're doing, and we'll keep in touch.
All right. Take care.
Friends, I hope you enjoyed our chat. I know I did. And please go buy his book, Thou shalt not be a jerk. Whether or not you're a Christian or a person of faith, I think you'll find this book super accessible, super helpful. You know, it gets easier and easier to be a jerk in this highly charged social media world we live in. We all need all the help we can get to not be jerks each and every day. So go buy this book. You can follow Eugene on all the socials at Eugene Cho and visit his website to learn more about him and the work that he's doing, eugenecho.com. You can find Let's Give a Damn on all the socials at Let's Give a Damn. You can find me on all the socials at Nick LaPara. And please hit us up, hello@letsgiveadamn.com, if you need anything at all. If you want to chat about anything at all, we're here for you. This show was created by me, produced by Chad Snavely, and the music is by our friend Propaganda. We are part of the Matter Media family, and we're so grateful for their partnership. Please share this episode with a friend or 2 or 10 or 12. Just please, friend today, just please share it. And please give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Every review helps. Come hang out with us next week and the next and the one after that. Tons of great conversations coming at you very soon. Sending so much love and light to each one of you. Keep it giving a damn, my friends. Peace.